Hello and welcome to Journey for Truth on webtalkradio.net. Thank you for joining me. I'm Tami Urbanek. Journey for Truth is always on demand and with many new episodes. You can visit my website at empowermentthroughhealing.org. You can just peruse my website or you can sign up for my free newsletter. A very quick announcement, Journey for Truth Radio is leaving Web Talk Radio. It's going to be moving to Spreaker.com and to YouTube. You can simply go to YouTube, search under my name, Tami Urbanek, and you're going to find my channel there already, and you can see the videos that are already there. You can also go to Spreaker.com and search for Journey for Truth, and you'll see current episodes there as well. I think most people are on Facebook, and if you have a Facebook account, search the Integrating the Teachings of Jonah group, and then select Ask to Join. You'll see many questions, articles, and information posted that reflect Jonah's teachings about humanity, change, learning to love, among many other topics. And you're going to find just a lot of very rich information there. So again, go to Facebook and search for the Teachings of Jonah group and ask to join. My guest this week is Judy Flickinger. Judy, did I say your last name correct?
Sounds close enough to me.
Judy is a nurse who spent many years in hospice. What did she learn and what does she want to share about the end of life and how to really make it meaningful and how she helped others make it meaningful? Judy, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now, in my work as a medium, I've helped many at the end of their life, and I find your work very interesting. Your experience. What exactly was your role in the hospice?
Well, I started doing hospice 26 years ago, and I began as a hospice nurse. I've been a nurse for many, many years, and my role at the beginning was seeing patients in their homes and leading them through that journey before their death. And one of the things that jumped out of me, Tammy, when this first started was how important the human spirit is. Mm-hmm. The person inside that dying body, how important it was to keep that alive and well while they were going through that journey. And what I saw was when that part of them was nurtured, that wonderful, wonderful things happened. So that became the focus of my care. I mean, I sent my hospice patients on vacations. I sent some of them back to work.
Wow.
The secret was getting, yes, and people don't understand this. And that, I mean, it kicks in their will to live. And if you get them in hospice early enough and you can nurture that piece of them, their will to live goes on. And so, you know, we in hospice know you help people feel better.
Right.
Most often they'll do better. So I started, as part of my practice, giving lectures and doing continuing education programs for nurses and social workers. And I taught some college courses to nurses.
Now, I always thought that when you go into hospice, you're going in to die. And what you're stating is that is not always correct.
Well, I'm not saying that isn't correct, but I'm saying is you can go on living for a lot longer than you thought you could.
Okay.
If that piece of you is nurtured. And if you get into hospice early enough, unfortunately, and this hasn't changed in the 26 years I've been doing hospice, people get in too late for that to happen. They come in when they have a few days to live. Well, see, I don't even call that hospice. I call that crisis management. To me, that's not hospice. And but when you get people in early enough during that journey, I mean, dying can take weeks, months, or sometimes even years.
Right.
And it's how you live that time that matters most of all to your spirit.
I agree.
And what we see in medicine, number one, we see people being given treatments far longer than they should because it becomes such a burden that they just give up.
Right.
I mean, the treatments are, I mean, some of the treatments are ghastly, and they don't have time then to nurture their spirit and to go on living. And people say, well, why? I mean, I still give a lot of lectures. And people say, well, Judy, why does that happen? Well, number one, because people aren't educated. And all studies indicate that people are not educated. But the dirty little secret is neither are physicians.
Right. Well, I think a lot of people fear death. And I think a lot of people, they fear learning about death and how to come to that transition because they don't understand what happens after death. So I agree. I see a lot of people are uneducated about the death process, what can happen after death, and then it simply creates a lot of fear. So what it sounds like is that you have taken on a mission, so to speak, to really help educate people and help bring a different perspective to death.
That's totally my mission and my passion.
Mm-hmm.
Let me finish that statement about physicians, though, Tami. They are not in schooling on end-of-life care. They get maybe 4 to 20 hours total in their medical education. Well, I've been doing this for 26 years, and I'm still learning things.
Right.
So if we go to our physician when we're facing a life-limiting illness and we say, is it time for hospice? I want people to know many physicians don't know when it's time for hospice. So the question shouldn't be, is it time for hospice? The better question would be, would you be surprised if I or my loved one, whoever the ill person is, were to die in the next 6 months? And if the physician says, no, I wouldn't be surprised, then I'm here to say it's time for hospice. No. And that's for all end-stage disease. Mm-hmm. That's not just cancer.
Right.
That's end-stage lung disease, liver disease, kidney disease, heart disease, the dementias, the neuromuscular diseases. There's so many people out there that are suffering, and it's unnecessary.
Now,
that's my path.
Yeah, what is your perception of death? How do you see the process of death differently that you could educate on?
Well, first of all, death takes just a second. You breathe out and you don't breathe in. That's death. Mm-hmm. It's the dying time that I am passionate about. And as I said, that can take weeks, months, or even years. My experience has been sitting at the bedside of hundreds of dying people in this quarter of a century that I've been doing this work, is that we're going to a better place. Mm-hmm. I have had patients tell me their experiences of when they see their loved ones. And let me tell you a quick story. I had a patient that was being cared for by her 20-something-year-old son. And I went to their homes on a Friday afternoon, and she was in a semi-comatose state. So I told her son, David, I wouldn't be surprised if your mom were to die tonight. You have my number. You have me paged, and I'll come to your home. That's what hospice nurses do. Mm-hmm. And so I got paged about 3 o'clock in the morning, and the operator said, Judy, there's a young fellow on the phone for you, and he said he needs to speak to you right away. And his name is David. So I thought, well, David's mom died. So I got on the phone, and he said, Judy, you're not going to believe it. He said, I just had to call you and tell you this. He said, my mom woke up, sat up in bed, and said, oh my, it's so beautiful. It's just so beautiful. And he said, and then she laid back down and she stopped breathing.
I've heard those stories, and those are amazing stories. Yeah. And I completely agree that it does not need to be a scary process. And for many, many people, it is a very, depending on the circumstances, of course, it's a very, can be a beautiful transition, a beautiful experience into their next adventure, their next way of living, so to speak, even though they'll no longer have their physical body. And now, share with us how you see and how what you have experienced in seeing people transition, other than the story that you shared with us. What can you share and how else you've seen people transition into the death?
Well, I've seen miserable dying time. I've seen patients that were in terrible pain. That's one of the reasons I went into hospice, because I was doing home care. And I saw people in terrible pain, and they weren't getting, the pain management that they needed. Their families weren't being supported. Their symptoms weren't being controlled. And I know that we in hospice know how to do that. So when you help people feel better, they do better. And that transition becomes one of peace and comfort. It brings a family together.
Most definitely.
And it's a wonderful thing. It really is. I've never had a family tell me, and I've gone to so many of my patients, I've gone to their funerals, and I've never had a family say to me, "We're sorry we did hospice." They have all said what a blessing this program was. And yet, Tami, the one thing that hospice hears all over the world, why didn't anyone tell us about this wonderful program before now? I have needed this help for so long. So that's one of the reasons I wrote my book. It's a personal trainer for death and dying, because you've never done it before.
Now, how do
my patients taught me what to tell, and that's what my patients would say to me, Judy, please tell other people, please tell other people so they don't have to go through a bad dying time. So that's why I wrote my book.
Good. And how do you define the human spirit?
How do I define the human spirit? I define that as being the person inside of us that keeps us going. We're not our bodies, Tami. We're our spirit. Who we are as a person is our spirit. And all of our bodies are going to die. I mean, life is terminal. None of us are getting out of this world alive. But our spirits do not have to die in the process. And yet, I have seen so many spirits that were destroyed before they became a hospice patient, because the treatments had just beaten them down. It wore them out. And it wore their loved ones down. And it wore their loved ones out. And it doesn't have to be that way.
No, it doesn't. And the story that you gave was a beautiful story, and one that I've heard is quite common. When a person comes to the very end of their physical life, they will, for many, have reported seeing loved ones there, other entities there to help them cross over, help them move on into the next realm. And then they continue on their journey into that next realm. And that is, I think, what gets a lot of people so scared, is because they don't know what that next realm is, or they don't remember what that next realm is, and they get caught up in the physical dying piece. And you're right, we're all going to die. Everyone on this planet is going to end their physical life somehow, someday. And so it's coming to a point in life where no one needs to fear death at all. Now, you also talk about the conversation. What is the conversation, and why is that so important?
Well, this is a new movement. It's called the Conversation Project, and your listeners can find it online, theconversationproject.org. And it helps you to have the conversation with your loved ones before you ever get ill about what you want for your end-of-life care. And it's a very, very important conversation, because there will become a time when your loved ones are going to be called in to make decisions. And they might not be the decisions that you would choose for your end-of-life experience. So take that burden away from them. Go online and fill in the blanks, then have the conversation with your loved ones. And see, I've had that with my adult children, and I feel that that will be my last gift that I will give to them, because, as I said, I've seen too much, and I don't want it to be that way for me. So I've spelled it out quite clearly to them, what I want for my end-of-life care. And your listeners can go online and find those fill in the blank things, and then have the conversation with their loved ones. And there's no better time than during the holidays, because that's when we all get together. And it's a great time to have this conversation, and then you can put it aside. And it's not written in stone. I mean, if you're a healthy person, you can change your mind down the road. But right now, you know, I've told my 3 adult children exactly what I want. And I even said to them, and if you don't listen to this, I'm going to come back and haunt you, because this is really important to me.
That's excellent.
I've seen too much.
That's excellent. Have you found in some cases that people in hospice, they don't have their family visit anymore because they do have such a fear of death and dying?
Well, you know, we try really hard in hospice to bring families together. And very often when that happens, a great healing occurs in the family situation. Estranged children come back home because they know mom or dad are dying. And it's a wonderful thing to see that happen. And it brings a lot of peace to that person that is dying. When my father was dying, we were estranged. And yet, out of my other 2 siblings and myself, he had his neighbor call me in another state to come down and take care of him because I'm the nurse. Well, I had him, I took him back to my home, and I had him for 3 months. And we healed all of those emotional wounds that had occurred. And not only did he die in peace and comfort, but I'm living in peace now, because every girl wants to be loved by her daddy.
Right.
And I don't care how old the girl is.
Right. No, I agree.
Wonderful things can happen. And hospice, it can be instrumental in that. And I have been a part of that process by bringing families together with a family meeting and laying the cards on the table. You know, this is what your mom needs. This is what you can do for her. And great healings can occur.
You bring a wonderful element to the hospice care, in that bringing families together to heal old wounds, typically old childhood wounds, but sometimes wounds that originated in adult years. And with the number of people that I've worked with, it's always easier to heal old childhood wounds when the parent or the sibling or whomever is still alive, rather than waiting until after physical death has occurred and then trying to do it on your own. How did you heal those wounds with your father prior to his death? Was it just through conversation? I mean, did you have a deep conversation, or was it more about releasing and forgiving?
Well, it had to do with my half releasing and forgiving. He left my mother, and after 38 years of marriage, and he left her very poor. And she was used to country club living with my father. And it broke my heart to see that. And he knew that, and he just stayed away from me because he knew I would have something to say about it. Well, when he got sick and I started taking care of him, he kept saying to me, "You can't do this. You won't be able to get me out of bed. You won't." I said, "Daddy, I'm a nurse. Of course I can do this." And I did dressings on his wounds, and I took him back to my home and took care of him. And he said to me, "I didn't know you could do all this." And I said, "What do you think I've been doing all these years as a nurse?" He said, "I didn't know you were so smart." And I said, "Daddy, of course I'm smart. Look what I've done." And, it was a forgiveness on my part, but it was a shared love on both of our parts. And him saying, "I'm sorry." I needed to hear that. And I needed to hear, "I love you." I don't ever remember him telling me he loved me.
Wow.
I needed to hear that. I mean, I was very close to my mom.
Right.
But, so I needed that. and it just erased it. I mean, all those years, it just erased it.
That's beautiful.
And now I have peace.
Yes, and that is the important piece as well, giving you a sense of peace, a sense of love to take throughout the rest of your life. And I think that's what life is all about, is healing old wounds. It's learning to come to know who we are, why we're here, and healing the old wounds that are there. And it sounds like you did a beautiful job of it with your father. What is
so
the...
I just needed to know what I had accomplished. I needed him to know that I'm not what he thought I was. And at the time, I told him, Daddy, these are the messages I got from you, and I just want you to know I don't believe them anymore.
Wow.
He needed to know that.
Mm-hmm. That's powerful. That's very powerful. What is the message that you want to leave with the listeners today about the importance of hospice and the importance of making end of life very meaningful?
Well, number one, I want them to know we're doing a terrible job. All studies show we're not handling end-of-life care very well in our country and in the world. I need them to know that this is a commercial, I guess, but if they read my book, it's a little $13 book, Spirit Matters, How to Remain Fully Alive with a Life-Limiting Illness. They'll learn a lot about end-of-life care that not only they didn't know, but their physician doesn't know. Mm-hmm. I did a lecture about a week and a half ago, and a lady stopped me and she said, Judy, I just want you to know, I gave your book to my son in another state, she said, she said, he's a physician. And his reply back to me is, Mom, I didn't know this stuff. Why didn't they teach me this in medical school? So I need your listeners to know they can learn a lot by reading my book. I'd like them to know that I have a website.
Great.
It's www.spiritmattersauthor.com. And, I need them to know that unnecessary suffering at the end of life is just what it's called. It's unnecessary.
That is a beautiful message, and you gave your website. People can also find your book on Amazon, correct?
Correct, and it's available on Kindle also.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Judy, for being a guest on my show today.
Thank you for having me, Tami.
And I want to thank the listeners for joining me here as well on Journey for Truth. Until next time, have a fantastic week.